Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a truly pivotal, yet often unsettling aspect of American history: presidential assassinations. This isn't just about the tragic events themselves, it's really about how these profound shocks served as violent, powerful, and often, well, ironic catalysts for fundamental change in the American narrative.
Yep.
We've got a fascinating stack of sources to unpack, focusing on these psychopolitical patterns surrounding the events.
What's truly striking when you look at our sources is how these acts, they seem like singular moments of violence.
Right, isolated tragedies.
Exactly. But they actually became historical fulcrums, real turning points that directly shaped the legislative, institutional, and even cultural transformations that followed.
Okay.
So our mission today is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge from these sources, helping you understand not just what happened, but why it mattered so profoundly.
And how these events still resonate, maybe in ways we don't always realize.
Precisely. How they continue to resonate today.
Absolutely. We'll explore the political and social landscapes that, produce these moments. We'll dive into the profiles and the complex motivations of the men who pulled the trigger, analyze the events themselves in vivid detail, and then crucially examine the enduring legacies.
Yeah, the ripple effects.
As we peel back the layers, you might find yourself surprised by some of the profound ironies and unintended consequences we uncover. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So, to really set the stage for our deep dive, our sources consistently frame these four successful presidential assassinations: Abraham Lincoln, James A. Garfield, William McKinley, and John F. Kennedy, as far more than just isolated tragedies.
Oh, much more. They were seismic shocks. They irrevocably altered the nation's direction, no question.
Right.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, each assassination occurred at a really critical inflection point in American history. These were moments where the nation stood on a precipice, grappling with immense change.
Okay, like Lincoln in 65.
Consider Abraham Lincoln's death in 1865. It came at the very moment the Civil War was ending. I mean, a time of immense relief across the North,
Sure.
but also profound uncertainty over the future of a reunited nation. His death removed the primary advocate for a moderate and conciliatory reconstruction.
Yeah, his whole approach.
It plunged the process into a much more bitter political struggle that would really define race relations and federal power for the next century.
Wow.
Then, just 16 years later, you have the murder of James A. Garfield in 1881.
Right, the Gilded Age.
Exactly. At the zenith of the Gilded Age,
Right.
an era defined by the corrupt spoils system of political patronage.
Okay.
His assassin wasn't some, enemy of the state. He was a grotesque product of that very system.
A disappointed office seeker.
That's him. And the public revulsion at the crime directly led to the dismantling of patronage and the professionalization of the American civil service. A huge change.
And this pattern of sort of violent catalysis continued into the 20th century, didn't it?
Precisely. The 1901 assassination of William McKinley occurred right at the dawn of the Progressive Era, a time of immense industrial power, widespread labor unrest, rising anti-capitalist sentiment.
A real pressure cooker.
It really was. His death at the hands of an anarchist propelled his dynamic vice president, Theodore Roosevelt, into office.
TR.
Yes, ushering in an age of trust-busting and robust federal regulation that fundamentally created the modern activist presidency.
And finally, JFK.
Finally, we arrive at the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963. This struck at the height of the Cold War and the absolute apex of the civil rights movement.
Such a tense time.
Incredibly tense. The national trauma, amplified by the then new medium of television,
You're the one watching.
provided the critical political momentum for passing landmark civil rights legislation. But also, paradoxically,
Yeah.
it shattered the post-war consensus of trust in government.
Yeah.
It really gave birth to a modern culture of conspiracy and cynicism that, well, you could argue endures to this day.
As we delve into our sources, one common thread that emerges among these assassins is the striking spectrum of their motivations. It's not one size fits all, is it?
Not at all. And this raises a really important question. Were these just random acts by isolated individuals? Or were they, as our sources seem to suggest, violent expressions of the deepest conflicts of their respective eras?
Right. Reflections of the time.
I think so. We see a range from John Wilkes Booth's clear, coherent political ideology. He wanted to save the Confederacy and white supremacy.
Very direct goal.
To the complex and frankly, baffling alienation of Lee Harvey Oswald, whose act remains this vortex of psychological and political debate.
Still debated today.
Constantly. And between these poles lie Charles J. Guiteau, a man whose personal grievance and profound mental instability were filtered through the lens of Gilded Age political factionalism.
A product of his time, in a way.
And Leon Czolgosz, a radical ideologue driven by an impersonal anti-capitalist fury.
Different types of anger.
Different types, but all channeled into this ultimate act. What's remarkable, and perhaps painful, is how the American political system, despite the immense shocks, responded to each crisis with lasting reform.
Often in ways the assassins never intended.
Often in ways diametrically opposed to the assassins' aims. It's a recurring theme.
Let's start with the one etched deepest in our collective memory. Abraham Lincoln, tragically killed in 1865. The Civil War was just ending. That moment of immense relief, but also, as you said, profound uncertainty.
The political landscape was precarious, to say the very least. I mean, the Civil War had just claimed over 600,000 American lives.
Unimaginable.
And while General Lee's surrender at Appomattox on April 9th brought these delirious celebrations across the North, the peace was incredibly fragile.
It wasn't all signed and sealed yet.
Not at all. The Confederate government hadn't formally surrendered. Jefferson Davis was still at large. Many feared the conflict could reignite. And the central political question consuming Washington and the nation was Reconstruction. How do you rebuild the devastated South? How do you reintegrate these former Confederate states? And crucially, what status would newly freed African Americans hold?
Huge questions.
Monumental. President Lincoln, having guided the Union to victory, advocated a moderate conciliatory approach.
From malice toward none.
Exactly. From his second inaugural, with malice toward none, with charity for all, emphasizing healing and unity. His 10% plan proposed a lenient path for Southern states to rejoin, reflecting his primary goal of swift national unity.
And this conciliatory approach placed Lincoln in a really difficult political position, didn't it? Even within his own party.
It absolutely did. This stance put Lincoln in direct opposition to the powerful and vocal faction of radical Republicans.
Figures like Thaddeus Stevens, Charles Sumner.
Exactly. They viewed the Confederacy as conquered territory that needed fundamental remaking, not just reintegration. They demanded a far more punitive peace for the South and robust federal protection for freedmen's rights, including, crucially, universal male suffrage.
A completely different vision.
Completely. This ideological clash between the executive and legislative branches over the very soul of Reconstruction was the central political drama of the era.
And Lincoln was holding it together.
Lincoln's immense authority and, frankly, his unparalleled political skill were the primary forces holding the more extreme, radical impulses somewhat at bay. Without him, the balance of power was inevitably going to shift dramatically.
And the social climate across the nation mirrored this deep political division. It wasn't just in Washington.
Very much so. The South, though economically devastated, saw its white population largely unrepentant.
They hadn't changed their minds.
Not fundamentally. They saw the war's end as a military defeat, sure, but certainly not a refutation of their cause or an end to racial hierarchy. They resisted any notion of black equality.
And in the North?
In the North, victory was celebrated, of course, but still tempered by deep-seated racism and anxiety over the implications of emancipation. You see this vividly in the New York City draft riots of '63.
Horrific violence.
White mobs lynching African Americans, destroying their homes. It exposed violent anti-black sentiment even in the heart of the Union.
And D.C. itself.
Washington, D.C. itself was this volatile microcosm, technically under martial law, teeming with soldiers, government workers, thousands of newly freed people.
Right.
But still very much a Southern city at heart, full of Confederate sympathizers, spies. It was in this atmosphere of fragile victory, profound political schism, and simmering social hostility that John Wilkes Booth found both his motive and his opportunity.
It's in this tension that John Wilkes Booth, a famous actor, found his opportunity. And he wasn't some unknown figure. Our sources highlight he was part of an esteemed theatrical family, earning the equivalent of over $500,000 today at his peak.
That's such a crucial detail. Booth was no anonymous malcontent or social outcast. He was born into the preeminent theatrical family of the 19th century.
The Barrymores of their day, almost?
Pretty much. With a legendary eccentric father, Junius Brutus Booth, and an older brother, Edwin, widely considered the nation's greatest tragedian.
Wow.
John Wilkes himself was charismatic, strikingly handsome, hugely successful on stage, often playing villains.
And the family background itself is fascinating, isn't it? named after assassins and radicals.
It really is. His father was named Junius Brutus, Caesar's assassin. John Wilkes was named for a radical English politician. It reflected this deeply ingrained family ethos that valorized resistance to perceived tyranny. Even his father had apparently sent a death threat to President Andrew Jackson decades earlier. This familial backdrop of theatricality, dramatic flair, political dissent, it provided fertile ground for John Wilkes's own developing radicalism and sense of, well, personal destiny.
His motivation, as our sources make abundantly clear, was unequivocally political. No ambiguity there.
None whatsoever. His motivation was rooted in a fervent, deeply held pro-Confederate ideology. He was a passionate supporter of the Confederacy, an outspoken advocate for slavery, and a virulent white supremacist.
He saw Lincoln as a tyrant.
A despotic tyrant who had unjustly waged war upon a free people, in his view. His hatred for Lincoln was personal and intense. He'd even volunteered in the militia that hanged the abolitionist John Brown in '59.
Right.
Throughout the war, Booth used his position as a traveling actor to serve as a Confederate agent, a smuggler, moving across lines.
But his initial plot wasn't assassination.
No. Initially, it was kidnapping. To kidnap Lincoln and hold him for prisoner exchange. But as the Confederacy's military fortunes just collapsed in early 1865, Booth's plans grew more desperate, more violent.
And the final trigger.
The ultimate transgression for Booth, the event that unequivocally shifted his focus to assassination, was Lincoln's public speech on April 11, 1865.
What did Lincoln say?
He endorsed suffrage for some African Americans, particularly those who had served in the Union Army. This was, to Booth, an absolutely unacceptable subversion of what he believed was the natural racial order. That pushed him over the edge.
His diary, later found on his body, is chilling. He actually saw his act as heroic tyrannicide, didn't he? Believing God made him the instrument of his punishment.
Yeah, he fully expected to be hailed a savior of the South.
Psychologically, what do the sources suggest? Was he insane?
The consensus is that he wasn't legally insane. But contemporaries described him as temperamental, emotionally unstable, profoundly egocentric traits likely exacerbated by a growing alcohol problem, much like his father.
So a mix of fanaticism and narcissism.
I think that's fair. His psyche combined sincere political fanaticism with a narcissistic, almost theatrical desire for fame and historical importance. As an actor, he was used to being the center of attention. His favorite role was Brutus, the classical slayer of a tyrant. His writings reveal a man with a grandiose sense of self-worth who believed something decisive and great must be done, and that he was the man destined to do it.
His ultimate performance.
He saw the assassination as his ultimate performance, a dramatic act on the stage of history that would secure his immortality, maybe even eclipse his famous brother's achievements. This fusion of ideology and ego created a man who was both rational in his planning and utterly convinced of the righteousness of his heinous act.
The event itself, Good Friday, April 14th, 1865, at Ford's Theater, it almost feels like a twisted play. And Booth, knowing the theater so well, planned something much bigger than just killing Lincoln, right?
Far more ambitious.
Yeah.
The plan was to decapitate the entire U.S. government by simultaneously murdering Lincoln, Vice President Andrew Johnson, and Secretary of State William H. Seward.
Wow. How did he plan the Lincoln part?
Meticulously. Days before, he bored a small peephole in the door to the presidential box to monitor them. He arranged a wooden bar to jam the door from the inside.
He knew the play, Our American Cousin.
He knew it well. Around 10:15 p.m., during the third act, he timed his entry to coincide with a line he knew would get a huge laugh, masking the pistol shot.
Clever, in a horrifying way.
He slipped into the box, unseen, raised a single-shot .44 caliber Derringer, fired it at the back of Lincoln's head. The bullet lodged behind Lincoln's right eye. He slumped forward, immediately unconscious.
And Major Rathbone tried to stop him.
Yes. Henry Rathbone, a guest in the box, lunged at Booth. Booth dropped the pistol, drew a large dagger, slashed Rathbone badly in the arm.
Then the jump to the stage.
He vaulted over the railing, 12 feet down. As he landed, his spur caught on a flag decorating the box, and he broke his left fibula, the smaller leg bone.
Ouch, but he kept going.
Despite the injury, he strode to center stage, raised the bloody knife, and shouted, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always to tyrants, to the stunned audience before limping out a back exit to a waiting horse and escaping.
And Lincoln
Never regained consciousness. He died 9 hours later, 7:22 a.m. on April 15th, in a small room in the Peterson boarding house across the street.
And, crucially, that broader conspiracy to decapitate the government failed, didn't it?
Completely failed, yes. The plan was audacious, but the execution fell apart. Vice President Johnson's assigned assassin, George Atzerodt.
What happened to
He
him?
lost his nerve, got drunk instead, never even attempted the attack.
Ian Seward.
Lewis Powell, a powerful Confederate vet, brutally attacked Secretary Seward and his son with a knife. Both were severely wounded, but miraculously survived.
So only Booth succeeded.
Only Booth succeeded in his core mission against Lincoln. This failure meant the government continued to function, avoiding the complete power vacuum Booth intended.
The aftermath was just this unprecedented outpouring of national mourning, wasn't it? From celebration to grief overnight.
Overnight. The news, spread rapidly by telegraphs, transformed a nation celebrating peace into one plunged into profound, unprecedented mourning. Disbelief turned to shock, grief, and incandescent rage.
Easter Sunday sermons casting him as a martyr.
Yes. Just 2 days later, pulpits across the country framed him as a national martyr, a second Christ who died for the country's sins. The sorrow was global, too. Condolences flooded in from around the world.
Which actually helped legitimize the government, right?
It did. It affirmed the legitimacy of the U.S. government internationally, showing the transfer of power was smooth, the Union would endure.
And for African Americans.
For African Americans, the grief was particularly acute, deeply personal. They lost their great emancipator. Their sorrow was palpable. Booth's hope for heroism, utterly shattered. He was universally condemned as a common cutthroat.
So what does this all mean for the course of American history? What's the biggest takeaway?
The most significant and enduring consequence was its catastrophic impact on Reconstruction. Booth's bullet didn't just kill a man. It effectively killed a policy.
Lincoln's moderate approach.
Gone. Lincoln's death removed the primary political and moral force advocating for a lenient path. Power unexpectedly fell to Andrew Johnson.
The vice president, a very different man.
A war Democrat from Tennessee.
Yeah.
Staunchly pro-union, yes, but also a deeply racist former slave owner with little regard for freed people's rights.
So he undid Lincoln's plans.
He quickly moved to implement his own lenient Reconstruction, granted sweeping amnesty to former Confederate leaders, allowed the old Southern elite to rapidly regain power.
And the Black Codes.
Under his watch, new Southern state governments enacted these repressive black codes designed to replicate slavery conditions, restricted where freed people could live, work, own property, creating a neo-slavery system.
Which outraged the North.
Outraged Northern reformers and set Johnson on a collision course with the radical Republicans in Congress, whom Lincoln had skillfully managed.
So Congress took over.
Yes, Congress seized control, overrode Johnson's vetoes, passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866, the Reconstruction Acts of 1867, placing the South under military rule. This struggle culminated in Johnson's impeachment in '68.
Though he wasn't removed.
Acquitted by one vote.
Yeah.
But the outcome, in a profound historical irony, was precisely the opposite of Booth's intent. He removed the South's most powerful shield, Lincoln, leading to a harsher, more militaristic Reconstruction, not the restoration he dreamed of.
Here's where the paradox truly deepens. Our sources illuminate how this assassination transformed a politically divisive figure into an immortal national martyr.
That's such a critical insight. Before his death, Lincoln was often reviled, even criticized by his own party for being too moderate, too powerful.
Right.
His death on Good Friday, at the moment of Union triumph, however, sanctified him and his cause in the national imagination.
His sacrifice became the meaning of the war.
The preservation of the Union, the abolition of slavery, they became inextricably linked to his heroic sacrifice. This narrative provided a powerful unifying symbol, helped legitimize the war's immense cost, forged a new American civil religion.
So Booth's bullet created a myth.
It inadvertently created a foundational myth for the reunited nation, elevating the presidency to a sacred office, cementing the Union's moral victory in a way a contentious political peace alone might never have. It gave the war a deeper spiritual meaning.
Okay, let's move on to 1881. We're in the heart of the Gilded Age, rapid industrialization, vast fortunes, but also, as you mentioned, widespread corruption. And central to this was the spoils system.
Yeah, the Gilded Age, a time of dazzling economic growth, immense social change, but also profound political dysfunction. And central to that dysfunction was indeed the spoils system.
Explain that again briefly.
Basically, federal jobs, from cabinet posts to local postmasters, were distributed not based on merit, but as rewards for party loyalty and campaign work.
To the victor belong the spoils.
Exactly. Since Andrew Jackson, it had become the engine of American politics, building party machines. By the 1880s, the federal bureaucracy had grown, and the system was just a source of profound inefficiency, incompetence, rampant graft.
Leading to calls for reform.
A growing movement for civil service reform. And this debate cleaved the dominant Republican Party into two warring factions.
The stalwarts and the half-breeds.
Precisely. The stalwarts, led by New York Senator Roscoe Conkling, staunchly defended the system, used it to build powerful machines. The half-breeds, more moderate, were open to reform, wanted to curb the power of party bosses. The rivalry was bitter, personal, often paralyzed the government.
The 1880 election saw James A. Garfield, a half-breed, nominated for president with stalwart Chester A. Arthur as his VP, a unity ticket, supposedly.
Supposedly. But Garfield's decision, once in office, to challenge a stalwart's control over the lucrative Port of New York Customs House ignited a political firestorm that effectively paralyzed the government just months into his term.
And into this volatile political cauldron stepped Charles J. Guiteau, the disappointed office seeker.
That's him. Guiteau's life story, as our sources detail, is just a litany of grand failures and bizarre delusions.
Tell us a bit about him.
Born in Illinois, 1841, tumultuous upbringing. Spent years in the Oneida community, a radical religious commune.
The one known for complex marriage.
That's the one. He was largely rejected there, nicknamed Charles Guiteau. Subsequently failed miserably as a lawyer, debt collector, journalist, theologian, published a plagiarized book.
Wow.
Drifted city to city, always one step ahead of unpaid landlords, angry clients, convinced he was on the cusp of greatness despite all evidence.
Our sources suggest his motivation was this truly toxic blend of personal grievance, political delusion, and almost messianic self-importance. He thought he got Garfield elected.
That's it exactly. After giving a single rambling speech for Garfield during the 1880 campaign, a speech few even noticed, he developed this narcissistic delusion that he was single-handedly responsible for Garfield's victory.
So he felt owed.
Convinced he was owed a high-level diplomatic post, specifically the consulship in Paris, a job for which he was utterly comically unqualified.
And he just wouldn't let it go.
Relentlessly pestered President Garfield and Secretary of State James Blaine. Letters, telegrams, unannounced visits to the White House, State Department.
Yeah.
Growing more agitated with each polite but firm rebuff.
What was the turning point?
An angry dismissal from Blaine. At that point, Guiteau's profound sense of entitlement just curdled into rage and a burning desire for revenge.
And he wrapped it in politics.
He rationalized his personal vendetta by adopting the political language of the era, declared himself a stalwart of the stalwarts, convinced himself killing Garfield was a political necessity to unite the party, save the republic, elevate Arthur, who, in his deranged mind, would then surely reward him.
He even claimed God told him to do it.
Yes, he claimed it was a direct divine command.
Psychologically, our sources are pretty clear. Guiteau was severely mentally ill. Narcissistic personality disorder, paranoid, grandiose delusions, maybe even neurosyphilis.
Indeed. His subsequent trial became one of the first, most high-profile insanity defenses in American history, turned into an unprecedented media circus, largely due to his own bizarre behavior.
How so?
Constantly interrupting, shouting insults, cursing his lawyers, delivering rambling, off-key, poetic speeches. Medical experts were sharply divided. Some said clearly insane, others a moral degenerate manipulating the system.
But the jury found him guilty.
They did, applying the legal tests of the time. Did he understand his actions were unlawful? Despite strong evidence of delusions, they said yes. He was hanged in June 1882, defiantly reciting a peculiar poem he wrote, convinced to the end he was a patriot.
The event itself, July 2, 1881, at the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station. There's that grim irony. He chose a fancy gun because he thought it would look better in a museum.
It's a striking detail, isn't it? An ivory-handled revolver. He'd actually stalked Garfield for weeks, passing up earlier chances because he didn't want to upset Mrs. Garfield or shoot him somewhere unseemly like a church.
Wow. So the morning of July 2nd.
Garfield, in high spirits, heading off for a summer vacation, arrived at the station, walking arm in arm with Secretary Blaine. Guiteau stepped out from behind a bench, fired 2 shots at point-blank range.
Where did the bullets hit?
The first grazed Garfield's arm. The second hit him in the back, shattered a rib, lodged behind his pancreas. Guiteau was immediately grabbed, shouting, "I am a stalwart. Arthur is president."
But crucially, our sources emphasize the wound itself wasn't immediately fatal.
No. It missed his spinal cord, all major organs, arteries. With proper care, even by 1881 standards, Garfield likely would have survived.
But what sealed his fate?
What followed was this 79-day medical ordeal. A tragic, almost unbelievable illustration of medicine before germ theory and antiseptic procedures were
The
accepted.
doctors made it worse.
A dozen different doctors, many prominent, repeatedly probed the wound with unsterilized fingers and instruments. Even a long metal probe, trying to find the bullet.
Introducing infection.
Massive infection, turning a non-lethal wound into this raging abscess-filled canal. Alexander Graham Bell even tried to find the bullet with an electrical device.
The inventor.
Yes, but it failed, likely due to interference from metal bed springs. As weeks wore on, Garfield's body was ravaged by blood poisoning, internal bleeding, sepsis. He slowly, agonizingly succumbed, dying on September 19, 1881.
So it was the doctors, not the bullet, ultimately.
It was the infection introduced by the doctor's unsterilized hands and instruments that killed him. A tragedy of medical ignorance.
That 79-day period between the shooting and Garfield's death also created a new kind of national experience, didn't it? Through the telegraph.
Yes, profoundly impactful. The telegraph allowed for daily, detailed updates on his condition, temperature, pulse, diet, the infection's progress. It transformed a political crisis into this intimate, shared public vigil.
The nation holding its breath.
Collectively invested in his agonizing struggle. It fostered a new sense of national community, unified by this human drama unfolding in real time. Internationally, his death strengthened ties with Great Britain. Guiteau, meanwhile, the most reviled man in America.
And the legacy. This is where we see that direct, powerful, and deeply ironic impact on American governance.
The most direct and consequential legacy was the death knell for the spoils system. The crime threw the corrupt nature of patronage into horrifying relief.
Guiteau was its ultimate product.
In all his delusion and entitlement, he was the ultimate pathological product of a system that taught people to view government jobs as personal rewards. Public outrage was overwhelming. Reform was demanded.
And ironically, it was President Chester A. Arthur who delivered.
In a truly profound historical irony, President Arthur himself, a product of the spoils system, former collector of the Port of New York, a leading stalwart, rose to the occasion, became an unexpected champion of reform.
He signed the Pendleton Act.
Signed the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act in 1883. Landmark legislation. Established a bipartisan civil service commission, merit-based system, competitive exams, made it illegal to fire for political reasons.
Didn't cover everything at first, though.
Initially, only about 10% of the federal workforce, but it fundamentally began the professionalization of the bureaucracy, started dismantling patronage culture, laid groundwork for the civil service we have today.
So Guiteau's act, which he thought would empower his faction and solidify the system, instead directly led to its destruction. The irony couldn't be starker.
It couldn't. Guiteau wasn't an anarchist. In his deluded mind, he was a loyal party operative, playing by the Gilded Age rules. His belief that political work entitled him to a job was a pathological exaggeration of the spoils system's core idea.
His madness reflected the system's flaws.
Exactly. It was a distorted mirror, reflecting the corrupt political culture that spawned him, making reform imperative. And that prolonged public vigil also marked a pivotal moment: presidency, media, public fancy, a precursor to what TV would later magnify.
Okay, fast forward 20 years to 1901. The U.S. is truly entering the 20th century. Immense industrial expansion, but also deep social, economic dislocation, growing unrest.
Yeah, the Gilded Age was giving way to the Progressive Era. Stark contrast. Massive corporations, trusts, amassing immense wealth, unchecked power, Rockefeller, Carnegie.
Titans of industry.
Meanwhile, millions of factory workers, many recent immigrants, toiling in grueling conditions, low wages, dangerous environments. This widening chasm between capital and labor fueled widespread unrest, frequent, often violent strikes, rise of radical ideologies.
And President William McKinley.
McKinley embodied the triumphant business-friendly republicanism. Elected in '96, seen as the advance agent of prosperity, guided the nation out of depression, won the Spanish-American War, established America as an imperial power.
But not everyone loved him.
To his detractors, labor activists, socialists, McKinley was a symbol of a corrupt capitalist system, a tool of the trusts, friend to big business at the expense of the working class.
Within this climate, anarchism emerged as this potent, deeply feared philosophy, especially among immigrants and labor. And this leads us to Leon Czolgosz. His story is one of profound alienation.
Yes. Anarchism advocating abolition of government. Often private property became linked in the public mind with violence, the doctrine of propaganda by the deed.
Violence to spark revolution.
The idea that a single dramatic act, like an assassination, could spark wider revolution. This gained currency through assassinations of European leaders, creating intense fear and xenophobia in the U.S. anarchism, seen as a dangerous foreign contagion.
And Czolgosz.
Leon Czolgosz was very much a product of this harsh industrial landscape. Born in Detroit, 1873, Polish immigrant parents. Worked in a Cleveland wire mill after minimal schooling.
Tough conditions.
Long hours, difficult conditions. In 1893, the mill cut wages. Led to a strike Czolgosz participated in. He was fired, blacklisted, left him profoundly embittered, alienated.
So he turned radical.
Became a recluse, disaffected with capitalism, Catholicism, immersed himself in socialist and anarchist literature. His motivation, unlike Guiteau's, was purely ideological, impersonal.
A self-proclaimed anarchist.
Believed all government was oppressive, wealthy exploited the poor. Briefly influenced by Emma Goldman, the prominent anarchist speaker, though the movement itself was suspicious of him.
Why suspicious?
His awkwardness, pointed questions about secret societies, led a leading anarchist newspaper, Free Society, to issue a public warning he might be a government spy. Deepened his isolation.
A pivotal inspiration for him was the 1900 assassination of Italy's King Umberto d'Este by an anarchist.
That resonated deeply. Gaetano Bresci, the assassin, declared he acted for the common man. Czolgosz saw him as a hero, striking against tyranny, began to believe it was his duty to do something similar in America.
Replicate the heroism.
Exactly. He chose McKinley not out of personal animus, but because the president symbolized the government and economic system he despised.
What did he say about it?
In his confession, "I killed President McKinley because I'd done my duty. I didn't believe one man should have so much service and another man should have none." His last words, "I killed the president because he was the enemy of the good people, the working people." Saw himself as a champion.
Unlike Guiteau, our sources confirm Czolgosz wasn't considered legally insane.
That's an important distinction. Medical exams, even a post-mortem on his brain, found no evidence of mental defect. Described as quiet, sensitive loner, brooded intensely over social injustice, internalized grievances.
The alias he used, Fred Niemann.
Niemann translates from German as nobody. It's telling. Suggests a profound sense of personal insignificance, alienation, which he perhaps sought to overcome through this monumental act.
So a rational, if fanatical, political conviction.
Not a narcissistic quest for glory like Guiteau. It was, in the words of one historian, a rational actor embracing a radical ideology that sanctioned political violence.
The setting. The Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. A grand fair. McKinley, genial, popular, notoriously reluctant about security.
He was, and it cost him his life. His secretary, George Corlieu, was deeply worried about the public reception planned in the Temple of Music.
Thought it was a risk.
A huge security risk, given the large, unstructured crowds. Tried twice to remove it from the schedule. Each time, McKinley insisted it be restored. Genuinely enjoyed meeting the public.
So September 6th?
Afternoon of September 6th. Czolgosz joined the long line, waiting to shake the president's hand. Concealed a .32 caliber Iver Johnson revolver by wrapping his right hand in a handkerchief. Looked like an injury.
Clever disguise.
At 4:07 p.m., as McKinley reached to shake his left hand, Czolgosz fired 2 shots, point blank.
Where did they hit?
One bullet ricocheted off a button, superficial wound. The second, tragically, tore through his stomach, pancreas, kidney, lodged in back muscles.
McKinley famously murmured, "Be easy with him, boys," as Czolgosz was tackled. Like Garfield, he didn't die immediately.
That's right. Rest to the Exposition's small emergency hospital. Surgeons operated, repaired stomach damage. But era before antibiotics, inadequate equipment couldn't find or remove the second bullet.
Looked like he might recover.
For several days, yes. Optimistic reports issued. Widespread relief.
No.
But September 13th, sudden downturn. Gangrene developed along the bullet path. Infection spread rapidly. Died early morning, September 14th, 1901.
The public reaction was this volatile mix of intense fear and anger, right? Aimed at anarchism, immigration.
A fierce backlash ensued. Widespread arrests of suspected anarchists, suppression of radical newspapers. Some even blamed the yellow press for creating a climate of vitriol.
Financial markets reacted too.
Sharply. Initial shooting news, then his death, caused a stock market drop. Not just general instability, but specific fear among investors about his successor.
Theodore Roosevelt.
Exactly. Fear of what the energetic, reform-minded TR would mean for big business.
Here's where the unintended consequences truly shine through. McKinley's death marked the definitive end of the Gilded Age's laissez-faire approach, ushered in the full force of the progressive era.
Absolutely. Theodore Roosevelt, just 42, became the youngest president. pledged publicly to continue McKinley's policies, but quickly pivoted to his own bold progressive agenda, the Square Deal.
Redefined the presidency.
Fundamentally, saw the office not just as administrative, but as a powerful steward of the people with authority to act for public good, regulate industry excesses.
The trust buster.
Famously took on the great corporate trusts, vigorously used the Sherman Antitrust Act to break up monopolies like J.P. Morgan's Northern Securities, intervened in labor disputes like the 1902 coal strike, pushed for consumer protection laws, Pure Food and Drug Act, expanded conservation dramatically.
Czolgosz's bullet.
Czolgosz's anarchist bullet, intended to destroy a symbol of the established order, inadvertently installed the very man who would most effectively challenge and reform that order from within. Fundamentally reshaped American capitalism and governance.
And what about the lasting institutional changes that came directly out of this tragedy?
2 immediate, profoundly lasting changes. First, formalization of presidential protection.
Finally.
After the third assassination in 36 years, Congress finally acted. Secret Service existed since '65, but mainly for counterfeiting. After McKinley, Congress formally directed the Secret Service to assume full-time, permanent protection of the president.
Created the presidential bubble.
Fundamentally altered the presidency, created that permanent security apparatus. The second legacy was legislative, born from fear of radicalism.
The Anarchist Exclusion Act.
Public outcry led to new federal laws, notably the Immigration Act of 1903, the Anarchist Exclusion Act. For the first time, barred entry to the U.S. based on political beliefs anyone opposed to organized government. Significant restriction on immigration.
So the assassination marked the definitive end of what we might call the accessible presidency.
It really did. That image of the president in an open reception line, shaking hands with any citizen, a cherished symbol. McKinley's insistence on maintaining it, against warnings, led directly to his death.
So the response was a permanent barrier.
Immediate and permanent.
Yeah.
Created a physical, symbolic barrier between president and public that hadn't existed formally. Institutionalized that core dilemma. Democratic leader needing accessibility versus head of state needing protection. The first major step towards the modern presidential bubble, forever changing the office.
Now, we arrive at John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963. A truly collective national trauma, still intensely scrutinized today. The U.S. was simmering with tension, caught between post-war optimism and convulsive social change.
The early 60s, a fascinating crucible of hope and anxiety. The Cold War against the Soviet Union defined foreign policy, permeated everything. The Cuban Missile Crisis in '62
brought the world to the brink.
Left an indelible mark, intensified the ideological struggle. Domestically, the civil rights movement was at a critical turning point.
Sit-ins, freedom rides.
Grassroots movement gaining powerful momentum. Violent resistance in the South, Birmingham images, dogs, fire hoses broadcast on national TV, shocking the nation's conscience.
Forced Kennedy's hand.
These events forced Kennedy to publicly commit his presidency to the cause in June '63. Called civil rights a moral issue, proposed comprehensive legislation to outlaw segregation, protect voting rights.
This placed Kennedy at the very center of a deeply polarized landscape, attacked by segregationists and by the right wing for being soft on communism. Dallas, where he visited, had a particular reputation.
A hotbed of anti-Kennedy sentiment. This climate of hate, as many later called it, formed the turbulent backdrop. Just a month before, UN Ambassador Adlai Stevenson was accosted, spat upon by protesters in Dallas. A stark warning.
And the assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, remains the most enigmatic, maybe the most unsettling.
His motivations continue to be debated endlessly.
Our sources paint his life as this portrait of profound alienation and failure. Transient, unstable childhood, poverty, neglect. That psychiatric evaluation at 13.
Diagnosed personality pattern disturbance with schizoid features and passive-aggressive tendencies. Noted his social isolation, a vivid fantasy life centered on omnipotence.
An emotionally starved, affectionless youngster.
As one social worker observed. Felt like a burden, never formed trusting relationships. Bounced between foster homes, schools, always an outsider. His embrace of Marxism as a teen. Less structured philosophy, more an expression of hostility towards the world.
Rebellion.
Seeking identity in opposition. Joined the Marines, court-martialed twice. Defected to the Soviet Union in '59, dramatic gesture, but quickly disillusioned.
Didn't find what he was looking for.
Returned to the U.S. in '62 with his Russian wife Marina, his profound resentment unabated. Later became a vocal, solitary supporter of Castro's Cuba. formed a one-man chapter of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee.
The Warren Commission, which investigated, couldn't pinpoint a single motive, but concluded it was a complex combination.
The report pointed to his avowed commitment to Marxism and communism, deep-seated resentment of all authority, inability to establish meaningful relationships, personal frustrations, and this overarching urge to find a place in history, assert himself.
What do later analyses suggest?
Paint a picture of a deeply disturbed, introverted, temperamental loner with grandiose fantasies compensating for a life of failure. History of impulsive violence, earlier attempt on General Edwin Walker, documented abuse of his wife, poor impulse control, capacity for aggression.
The ultimate assertion of power by the powerless.
A violent imposition of his existence on a world that ignored or rejected him. As that social worker hauntingly put it, a man nobody gave a darn about.
The event itself unfolded in Dealey Plaza, Dallas, November 20th, 1963. The presidential motorcade, winding through Dallas despite his reputation, drew large crowds.
Friday, November 22, JFK and Jackie, Governor Connolly and his wife Nellie, in an open-top limo. Thousands lined the streets cheering. Around 12:30 p.m. Central Time, motorcade made a slow turn onto Elm Street, passed through Dealey Plaza,
Past the Texas School Book Depository,
where Oswald had recently started working. From a sniper's nest on the 6th floor, meticulously constructed from boxes, Oswald fired 3 shots. 6.5mm Carcano rifle, mail-ordered under an alias.
Where does the shots go?
One missed the car entirely. Another, the controversial magic bullet, entered Kennedy's upper back, exited his throat, then struck Governor Connolly, serious injuries, but not fatal to him.
And the final shot
Struck the president in the back of the head. Massive, devastating wound, immediately apparent. Motorcade sped to Parkland Memorial Hospital. Head wound wasn't survivable. Pronounced dead at 1 p.m.
And the chaos didn't end there. Oswald was captured fairly quickly, but then that truly shocking turn of events unfolded.
Oswald fled the depository, went to a boarding house. Less than an hour later, shot and killed Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit, arrested around 2 p.m. in a movie theater after a struggle.
But then Jack Ruby.
2 days later, Sunday, November 24, Oswald being transferred from city to county jail, live on national television. Dallas nightclub owner Jack Ruby stepped out of the crowd in the police headquarters basement.
Shot him point blank.
Fatally shot Oswald with a .38 revolver. This stunning act, witnessed by millions, killed the only man who could definitively explain the assassination. Irrevocably cemented public belief in a wider conspiracy, fueled decades of questions.
The assassination of JFK was a collective national trauma, but experienced in this uniquely immediate, pervasive way by millions.
For 4 days, the network suspended all regular programming, commercials, continuous, uninterrupted coverage.
Everything stopped.
Initial reports, solemn announcement, Johnson swearing in on Air Force One, Oswald's shocking murder, the state funeral. This shared media experience united the nation in grief, shock. Millions felt a profound personal loss for Camelot.
Left a deep scar.
Often cited as the moment the nation lost its innocence, a collective idealism faded.
But the most significant, lasting legacy is perhaps the profound crisis of trust it ignited.
Absolutely. To quell speculation, conspiracy theories, President Johnson established the Warren Commission, chaired by Chief Justice Earl Warren.
Their conclusion.
After 10 months, issued its report September 64. Concluded Oswald acted alone in killing Kennedy. Ruby acted alone in killing Oswald.
But the public didn't buy it.
From the outset, failed to convince the American public. Widespread skepticism. Fueled by perceived inconsistencies, Commission's failure to investigate certain leads fully, sheer implausibility for many that Oswald could act alone.
And Ruby killing Oswald on TV?
Seemed like blatant silencing of a witness. For 6 decades since, polls consistently show a majority of Americans believe it was a conspiracy.
Later investigations didn't help.
The House Select Committee on Assassinations, HSCA, in the 70s concluded probable conspiracy, but couldn't identify co-conspirators. Further muddied the waters, deepened public doubt.
So this created a lasting crisis of confidence.
This widespread rejection of the official narrative, compounded by Vietnam, Watergate, created a profound, lasting crisis of confidence in government institutions, gave rise to a mainstream culture of conspiracy and distrust that persists today, fundamentally altered the relationship between citizens and government.
Yet, in the midst of this national trauma and burgeoning distrust, President Johnson leveraged Kennedy's memory for extraordinary legislative gain.
He skillfully wielded the memory of his predecessor as a powerful political tool, framed passage of Kennedy's stalled agenda as a moral imperative, a fitting tribute.
Most significantly, the Civil Rights Act.
The landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964. Kennedy introduced it, but it faced a formidable blockade from Southern segregationists in Congress. Filibuster threatened to kill it.
Johnson pushed it through.
Johnson, leveraging his legendary legislative mastery, deep understanding of Congress, and the immense political capital from the assassination and grief, broke the filibuster, signed the bill into law, explicitly honoring Kennedy's legacy, transformed American society, outlawed segregation in public accommodations, schools, employment.
The assassination also spurred constitutional change.
Provided the final impetus for the 25th Amendment. The chaos after the shooting, nuclear threat, need for stable chain of command, highlighted urgent need for clear procedures for presidential succession and disability.
So that was codified.
Led to congressional passage and state ratification of the 25th Amendment in 1967, formally codifies these procedures.
It's so strikingly ironic. A self-proclaimed Marxist strikes a blow against the American establishment, and it paradoxically unleashes this wave of sweeping progressive legislation.
Indeed, the irony is profound. In life, Kennedy was often pragmatic, cautious, especially on civil rights, feared alienating Southern Democrats. His agenda was largely stalled, transformed into a liberal martyr. Johnson immediately invoked his memory, created unstoppable political momentum. This emotional political force unlocked passage of not just the Civil Rights Act 64, but Voting Rights Act 65, the Great Society programs.
Johnson achieved what Kennedy might not have.
Johnson enacted a liberal legislative revolution Kennedy himself would likely have struggled to achieve. Oswald's act, meant to strike against the establishment, paradoxically unleashed the most significant wave of progressive legislation in a generation.
And accelerated political realignment.
Dramatically. National Democratic Party's embrace of civil rights drove white Southerners, conservatives, toward the Republican Party. A shift reshaping American politics for half a century, effects still seen today.
And for many, the shots in Dealey Plaza didn't just kill a president, they killed a certain kind of faith in their government.
For the first time, a major national trauma was processed by a majority through this lens of deep, abiding distrust of official sources. Shattered the broad post-WWII consensus faith in institutions. Ushered in an era of cynicism, skepticism, a defining feature of American public life. Gave birth to modern mainstream conspiracy culture viewing official narratives with suspicion. Fundamentally changed the citizen-leader relationship.
What an incredible deep dive into these 4 seismic events and their reverberations. Looking across Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, Kennedy, what common patterns emerge among the assassins themselves from our sources?
Our sources reveal this consistent, though evolving pattern. Often alienated men who, through violence, sought to impose their will on history, achieve a twisted sense of personal significance, strike at a president symbolizing a system or ideology they despised.
The motivations changed over time.
Specific motivations evolved, yes. Booth's clear political goal, Guiteau's pathological entitlement within a corrupt system, Czolgosz's impersonal ideological fury, Oswald's complex psychological damage, political extremism.
But the underlying profile?
A man on the fringes, defined by grievances or inability to connect, finding warped agency in a single devastating act, often seeking to force change or assert their own existence. It remains chillingly consistent.
And the theme of transformative, often unintended consequences truly seems to be a powerful thread through all of them.
Absolutely. In each case, the assassin's bullet unleashed forces far beyond his control or comprehension, catalyzing fundamental lasting reforms that reshape the nation in ways the perpetrator never envisioned, often antithetical to their intentions.
Booth ensured harsher reconstruction.
Guiteau's murder destroyed the spoils system he served.
Czolgosz's blow installed TR, the reformer.
And Oswald's strike provided political martyrdom for landmark civil rights laws.
It's an unsettling revelation, exposing the inherent fragility of a system that places a single individual at the apex of power, making them a focal point for all the grievances and pathologies of a nation.
It really does. And this raises an important question. Despite the immense trauma, the American system didn't collapse. In each crisis, the nation responded with constitutional continuity and eventually significant institutional reform.
Civil service, Secret Service amendment.
The evolution of presidential protection, the relationship between public and president, the media's role, all irrevocably altered, creating the modern presidency and political landscape we know today.
As we close out this deep dive, it's clear these assassinations weren't just isolated historical footnotes. They were violent expressions of deep societal conflicts that, ironically, often led to outcomes diametrically opposed to the assassin's intentions, forever altering the trajectory of the Republic.
This leaves us with a truly provocative thought. If political violence has repeatedly produced such profound and often unexpected transformations in American history, what does that tell us about the unpredictable forces that shape a nation's destiny? And maybe our own capacity or even responsibility to grapple with these immense, often unintended consequences. What new insights or connections stand out to you about these pivotal historical turning points after this deep dive?
We hope this deep dive has given you a fresh perspective and deeper understanding of these monumental moments in American history. Until next time, keep digging deeper into the stories that shape our world.